Welcome back to Sahara TV. We are sorry about the technical problems. We have a conversation with Mr. Clement Iloabachie on his role in Biafra, on Ojukwu, and everything around the life and the burial Ojukwu received. When we cut off, he was talking about his opinion on how Ojukwu was treated by the country during this last week. So, Mr. Iloabachie.
Please.
Yeah. So, continue.
Yes, like I was saying, Ojukwu deserved every honor that was bestowed to him by the Nigerian government because he stood for everything that Nigeria is presently pursuing. The unity of Nigeria, the peace and stability of Nigeria, that was all Ojukwu stood for. But he was badly misinterpreted. But now that Nigeria is coming back to everything, now he passed on. Now he deserved whatever burial that was given to him.
Why was he misunderstood? If I get you right, why was he misunderstood by people?
It was because in Nigeria there was this greed to capture or to belong or to so when he brought out his ideas on how Nigeria would stand, people had their own other ideas and wanted their own ideas to shine instead of Ojukwu's. So on that level he was misunderstood. But now they are now understanding, especially all the things that we agreed on that Aburi conference is exactly what Nigeria is pushing for now.
You were in the Nigerian Air Force. Why did you join the Biafran side?
Yes, when we were driven out of the north, the Nigerian Air Force Kaduna, everybody ran down to the east, and then we were with Ojukwu, pondering on what next, and then more demonstrations, more killings of people in the north, more killings of the Igbos. It was a kind of pogrom, and after that the leader decided we should enough was enough, and that we should now stay on our own since we were no longer wanted in Nigeria. So when the war started, the Nigerian Air Force had no planes, and then we, the officers, then junior officers, felt like, hey, we cannot sit idle while the Igbos are being exterminated. So I decided to join the army, and then that was how I joined the army. While others were waiting for the planes to arrive or Air Force to get organized, Biafran Air Force. So I was in a rush to stop whatever massacre that we are going on to join the army that was functioning at that time. Yes.
So did you get to fly any plane for Biafra, or you just stayed in the army?
I joined the infantry actually because at that time it was only the infantry section of the army that was functional, and the Nigerian troops were already in Nsukka area, and so I was one of the officers that were called upon to join an incursion into the Midwest, and that was That was it.
Yeah, we'll get to that role you played. But first of all, I want to know, as Ojukwu, what kind of leader was he during Biafra?
Wonderful. He had no. He was spotless. Let me use that word. Everybody listened to him. For those of us in the military then, we knew how he decided to. In fact, as a matter of fact, I was in the group that went to Kano to ask him to bring his own troops in Kano then, and then he refused. He disagreed with Nzogu.
You're talking about the 1966 coup.
That is correct.
You were one of those that asked him to join the coup, or to what did you ask him?
No.
Okay.
I was in Kaduna Air Force Base.
Okay.
We had our representative Amuchenwa, who was in the group of Nzogu that organized that January coup.
Yes.
So we were asked to go to Kano to talk to Ojukwu.
To get him to do what?
In fact, like I said, I was a very junior officer then.
Okay.
We had other people like Tim Onwatwegu and Nzogu, and in the Air Force it was Amuchenwa that we were following.
Okay.
But it was the Air Force plane that went to Kano.
Okay. Now let's go to the incursion into western region, the Midwest. What was the mission? What was the mission? Why did the Biafrans decide? What was the reason they decided to go into western region?
Yeah. The way I understood it was because of the pressure on the Nigerian troops from Nsukka pressing into Enugu. Then I know the Ojukwu and the group decided that the best thing to do was to see how to move into another area so that the Nigerians will now thin down their troops and then give less pressure on Enugu. And then while we were in Benin, then it was when I understood that actually Banjo and his first January coup group that were imprisoned in the East at that time organized themselves and then decided to also move into the Yoruba Ibadan and Lagos. And then so that automatically became what Ojukwu wanted. And hoping that as soon as we move in there, the Nigerians will thin down their troops in the then Biafra, Nsukka sector, and then start saving themselves on the Nigerian side.
Now, as Brigade Defense Officer, you worked closely with Colonel Victor Banjo. Can you, for our viewers who do not know who he was, can you tell us briefly who was Colonel Victor Banjo?
Colonel Banjo, like I said, he was in the army. Then I was in the Air Force, but as soon as I joined them, he made me his brigade defense officer, and that specifically was to protect him and his headquarters wherever we chose to establish his headquarters. And then so as soon as we finally established in Benin, Then I quickly took my troops and then established the defense there. And then the people, of course, started wiring the place, and then we started communicating with Enugu. That was how I. On your question, he was quite a very tall, huge man, very handsome, very tall, indeed. In fact, I recall some of the officers then. Anytime Ojukwu called from the east, I would hand over the phone to him. Some of the shorter officers, like Colonel Ifa Juna, Captain Adeleke, and all of them, they would hold their hands at his back to leap up. He will bring out the phone for them to be hearing. This is how tall and huge he was.
What was the relationship between him and Ojukwu? How did that happen during the period of the incursion into Western Nigeria? How did that relationship develop to the point where Victor had to be recalled to Enugu and he didn't come back?
Like you mentioned earlier, a book, I'm compiling a memoir on, and then of course I'll explain into details all those things. But in a nutshell, there was no such disagreement, except that on certain telephone exchanges, where they'll start with English and then end up with Yoruba.
You're talking about Ojukwu and Victor Banjo?
Yes, okay. Ojukwu and Colonel Banjo.
Okay.
When they start with English, then the next thing I'll hear, look Emeka, blah blah blah. Then they start speaking Yoruba.
And you don't speak Yoruba?
No, I didn't speak much.
Okay.
But what I noticed was that after the second trip, because the first trip he went to Enugu, he asked me to mount a Land Rover for him that Ojukwu was calling him, which I did. And then after he came back around 3-4 days, and then started reorganizing. At that time, we had an O group where he told us that we are no longer 55 Brigade, that we've now turned into a division, 104 Division, and that Colonel Akaya will command the 55 Brigade, Colonel Oche to command 54, and he was kind of distributing these things like that. And okay, am I going too far?
No, you're good. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay, so Banjo, when he eventually came to me and then asked why I was, because I was asked to hoist a Biafran flag in the headquarters at Benin. So they were asking me who asked me to, who did that. So I explained to them that it was Kokonlaka that gave me the flag. Apparently, it was brought by Ojukwu from Nigeria, Enugu. And then as I was digging it, they came and said no, that the people we were going to in Ibadan will think it was a conquest, because the first move we made, and we were stopped at Uwena Bridge, Fusu first, and then Uwena Bridge after Benin. Banjo spoke with Ojukwu on the phone, but the phone then was the one you wind up with batteries, the field phone system, which Ojukwu called, and then Banjo told him the problems we were having, and that he was going back to Benin. Then I noticed Ojukwu said no, we should continue the mission to Ibadan. So I noticed Banjo was telling him that all his contacts at Ibadan have now said, do not move further, just stay there. So this was the first disagreement I noticed with him and Ojukwu. And then finally we came down and settled in Benin, and that was when further arguments and disagreements continued.
So what do you think is responsible for the failure of that mission to get to Lagos? Why did it fail?
From my own personal military point, we had a delay in getting, because the mission was to get to Benin at 2 a.m., where the commander then, Colonel Wawo, had all the officers sitting at Benin at their headquarters. So we were to get there at 2 a.m. and then to get to Ibadan 4 a.m. and then the final was Lagos. And then while in Lagos, then the Air Force Fokker Friendship, which was captured from the Nigerian troops, we converted it into a bomb bay, and then converted it to throw some bomb. And then the people were asked to fly in that morning around 8 o'clock. We should have been at Ikeja.
If you had gotten to Lagos, what would have been the plan? You know, what would have been the mission when you get to Lagos? Was it to take over the government, or?
No, the way I understood it, the way the instruction was to bring Gowon.
Okay, to bring Gowon to the east.
Yes, to capture him dead or alive.
Wow. Okay. Now, the treatment that Banjo and Ifajuna got in Biafra when they went back, what was it about? Why were they killed, and who killed them? What was the story?
Like I said, I was in Benin, and then it was when we moved to Abo under Colonel Ademoyoga, whom we released from the prison in the Midwest that time, Okitopopa. When we got to Okitopopa, it was when Colonel Ademoyoga joined us in Benin. So when Banjo and the rest of them, Ifajuna, went to the east, went to Ojukwu the second time, they did not come back. So Ademoyoga was in command, and also Colonel Laka, who was commanding the original brigade we went with, was in the front. And then he would occasionally come to me and say, look, if there any letter coming from Enugu should be kept for him, do not give it to Colonel Ademoyoga. So at that time there was a little confusion on who was in command. Then finally Ademoyoga asked me that we should move to Abo. It was at Abo that Ademoyoga himself was arrested, and at the point I was the only officer from Biafra that remained. And things started, people started coming, somebody like Achus there, whom I had met earlier in his attempts to meet with Banjo, and so many others.
Okay, we will round this up, but I know that you'll be able to, hopefully in your book, flush out some of these details, because a lot of people will want to know what really happened between Enugu and the mission to go to the West, and the implication it had on both the war and the relationship between the East and the West. But in conclusion, I want to ask you, Janet, Governor Peter Obi of Anambra State yesterday said that the civil war ended yesterday because of the kind of burial given to Ojukwu. Do you think that the war has ended? And did it end yesterday?
You mean the war with the South and the North, or the war with Biafra?
The Biafran War. That's how Peter Obi put it. That the
Sure.
Biafran War ended yesterday.
Sure. I mean, it ended, the shooting war ended, but the Cold War has not ended, because there's a lot of negotiations, there's a lot of discussions on how the people Ojukwu defended should be protected. That has not been discussed. The Igbos are just second-hand citizens in their own country, Nigeria. So the war has not really ended as such.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Iloabachie, for coming on our show.
Thank you.
We will be back to take your calls and talk about some of these things we've discussed with these two gentlemen who were part of the experience, the Biafran experience. And we're also going to read some of your comments about our question, which was whether the burial of Ojukwu, the military burial he received, whether it helped to heal the nation. We have some of your comments here. So we will take a break, and when we come back, we will read this and take your calls.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is that, Rudolph? Those are people's comments.
Welcome back to Sahara TV. We asked you to tell us whether the burial that Ojukwu received, whether it helped to heal the nation. And we have some of your comments here. Ibrahim Katagum wrote, Abubakar Katagum wrote, no, no, no. Lawal Wushishi wrote, the burial of Ojukwu with full state honor, to me, is a plot by Jonathan to consolidate the newfound romance between the South-South and South-East for the advancement of secession planned by the powers that be. We are watching as events will unfold with time. Also, we have a comment from Adenike Akinsanya. He wrote, his people are still biased about the nation and the unity, especially when we talk about the next presidential election. During his burial, they have said that the North should forget it for 4 years. This can prevent the best and the brightest to get to that position regardless of his tribe, and it will definitely hinder national healing. Babake said that a rebel is a rebel even in death. Chinedu Eze wrote that yes, it is part of it, but not all. Aburi Accord is the major solution. Let's go back to Aburi Accord. From Ali Omar, he wrote, Ojukwu is nothing but a terrorist, a rebel, a person who fights the peace of Nigerians by killing people, a person who tried to dichotomize our country. His burial will not bring peace, but a politics. The other comments here. One from Emeka Mbata, he wrote that not his military burial honor, but the implementation of his dream, the Biafran nation that will bring the national healing. So it's been a wonderful show today, and initially we planned to take your calls, but I think that we have to end the show on this note. Until next week, we want to thank all our technical guys and our staff and all our guests, Dr. Denibo, Mr. Iloabachie, Mr. Wiwa, Chichi Okoye, Nwokwu Okoye, and every other person that appeared on our show. And next week, we'll be back at the same time, and we'll get you more of the stories happening in Nigeria and around Africa. So on behalf of everybody here, I say thank you and stay tuned.